this is a debate that has been on now for ever since I started my career, and I think probably will stay on until I finish my career. It remains as relevant as it was in 1960s, and I think it will probably remain relevant also the next 20 to 30 years. But as time changes, there are new issues that come up. So I think we just want to sort of look at what are the debates out there and how do we tackle those. Just to get started, I think this is fairly well known that the region has made very rapid progress in poverty reduction, but primarily driven by East Asia and China. But even if the rate of reduction has been quite rapid, but at the same time, the concentration of the remaining poverty that we have, we're talking about 600 million, actually it is in this region. So this region still remains as one of the largest concentrations of poor, and here we are only looking at income poverty. But if we go beyond income poverty and look at nutritional status, in fact, about 3/4 of the world's undernourished people are in this region. So no matter what we talk about, whether we, sort of modern value chains and rapid emergence of supermarkets and rapid emergence of more, sort of modern industries and so on, income poverty and dealing with undernutrition remains a major challenge for this region. Now, I just want to sort of, if you look at the experience of how, experience of poverty reduction in the region, how do we reduce poverty? And the experience is you need to have growth. Growth is a necessary condition. You cannot have it without economic growth. But growth is obviously not a sufficient condition. That's also fairly well known. It depends upon where the growth is coming from, what the nature of the growth is, what the basis of the growth is, and what sort of economic activities does it stimulate. Agricultural growth, in particular, has been shown to have largest impact on poverty. But what is the nature of mechanism? I mean, how does it, what's the mechanism through which that happened? And if you were to look at the experience of Green Revolution, clearly agricultural growth, the Green Revolution, which was supported by smallholder farmers, the growth, the smallholder farmers themselves are not creating large surpluses. They are creating small surpluses. But that surpluses, when they get invested into the local economy and the kind of local economy linkages that they stimulate, and that's where the real growth, the real impact on poverty comes from. And that's what economists really call a multiplier effect. Once you have this, and then it stimulates certain economic activities in rural non-farm sector and so on, and that gets the sort of that gives the fuel to the local rural economy, and that's where the real poverty reducing impact comes from. So this is what the multiplier effects are, and I would just like to share with you some sort of empirical estimates of multiplier effects in different regions, depending upon where the growth is emanating from. And this slide is based on some of the evidence that has been collected in a book that has been just come out, sort of Livestock's Many Virtues, that FAO is putting out. Across the world, across the region, the first bar, the blue bar, is primary livestock production. And other than high-income countries, be it East Asia, be it South Asia, and be it Sub-Saharan Africa, livestock sector stands out. Now, it's clearly because of the way livestock is distributed in this region, is the way sort of it links into the cash economy. So this is the only sector, or this is the sector that in terms, it stands out in terms of the kind of stimulus that it can provide to poverty reducing mechanisms. And if markets have any role in reducing poverty, then one has to look into the future as to say where the markets are going to go. And if you look into South Asia, I think milk is the only, it seems like that the livestock sector is the only, game in town, so to say. And the same thing applies also to East Asia. Meat and milk, these are the, everything else is stagnant or declining. But these are the two sectors which we see foresee. So if we want to sort of anchor our poverty reduction and sort of strategies to deal with nutrition and undernutrition on markets, then these are the two markets that we can actually anchor our strategies on. Now, these are fairly well known. We were trying to just pick out a few issues and debates yesterday as we were having discussions. And I thought that there were 4 kind of strands of thought that were emerging. And these are also the strands of thoughts which are reflected in the paper that we prepared. One is this sort of technology and institutions debate that keeps coming in this. And oftentimes these debates get polarized, whether it is the technology, and I think when we talk about technology, is there sufficient investment in technologies that are suited for smallholder production, or is it that the technology development is being driven more by large-scale large-scale production systems? We have seen it in poultry, we have seen it in pig. There's a lot of upscaling happening also in pig. And although we say so far that ruminants or the dairy sectors perhaps where we are not seeing large-scale production, I wouldn't be surprised if 5 to 7 years from now we will start seeing very large-scale dairies. So the issue is there sufficient investment in technology development which are suited for smallholder systems? The other side of the debate, of course, is do we have enough an institutional structure that can promote the technology development, that can also promote sort of institutional structures that can promote market inclusion for. So this is a debate that keeps coming back, technology versus institutions. Where do we put our money? Do we promote institutions or do we invest more in technology? And that links to the next issue, who makes that investment? Where does public sector come in and where the private sector? Looking at the literature, people often find, sort of go back to Green Revolution period and say that if the governments had not taken the leadership role at the time of Green Revolution, if they had not shown the political commitment, if they had not put in the policies, maybe some of the policies at the end now we stand now and we say perhaps we could have done things differently. But if that political commitment had not come from the public sector, if public sector had not taken the lead, we would not have had the Green Revolution. So there is evidence for public sector to take the leadership. There is, of course, the other side of the debate which says that, look, 1960s and 70s and 2012 and 2020 is not the same. Markets have developed, infrastructure is better, communication has improved. So the nature of market failure that existed in 60s and 70s is not the same. Now, and so this debate also often gets polarized between public and private roles. And I think we need some guidance from this forum as to how do we look into the future and look at what kind of role does public or the governments play. Yesterday we heard that the DG of Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences. He was very clear that government needs to provide the leadership role. In absence of that, we are not going to make progress. But how do we sort of complement public and private, knowing fully well that most of the investment is going to come from private sector. So it's a sort of the rules of the game are changing a little bit, and we need to have some direction as far as that is concerned. Going to the third issue, smallholder capacity, in a sense, whether the smallholder can actually respond to the complexities of the new market. And the markets have changed now. There's sort of, the supply chains, of course, we know, so they're no more limited to national boundaries and so on. Again, people go back and said, look at Vietnam, case of rice. I mean, the rice revolution has come from smallholders. If you look at a green revolution, it was all built on smallholder capacities. So the question of response from smallholders should not even be there. But there is another side of the debate which sort of talks about the market requirements and their ability to meet the product specifications and the kind of products that the market is demanding. And some people, in some people's mind, there is a disconnect. And I think the debate, again, if I read through the literature, I have seen that some argument that by continuing to hang on to this smallholder notion, maybe a romantic notion that we can continue to hold on to smallholders, we might actually be doing, we might be trapping them into low productivity environments. And the answer is not to keep them there. The answer is to get them out of there. So we need to actually invest in other skills and sort of have and build economies in a manner that there is an absorption of them that happens outside. So there is this. How do you sort of look into this? And then there's an issue of international trade, regional integration. I mean, trade, of course, can be welfare enhancing. That is the basic economic theory, that if you do something well and if I do something else well and if we trade, we both are better off. So that's what the theory of comparative advantage and so on will tell us. But when we look at some of the ground evidences, the trade has not always been welfare enhancing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to produce all that they need to consume. Obviously, we need to look into trade policies, and with the regional trade growing, with the global trade growing, I think at least when we discuss in some of the meetings, this is a region where we have two countries which are very big and they're surrounded by small countries. How do we look at trading relations and ensure that trade can actually be welfare enhancing? So those are some of the issues that we tried to pick up in yesterday's discussion, also from the literature. The other side of the story is, of course, that if we do, I think we do want to sort of, the smallholders are part of the game, and how is it that we target them remains a big question. And there are a number of experiences in the region through which smallholders can be brought into this market development process. And I think there I would invite Steve to share with you some of the models that he has studied, and then he will raise some more questions. And what we need from the forum is some guidance that we can take forward.
So I'm going to follow straight on from what Vinod was talking about and just touch on some of these institutional models that are being tried out in Asia. And I think if we look across Asia, I mean, it's kind of a hotbed of experimentation in terms of new different organizational forms to try to bring smallholders into participating in markets which are growing but also increasingly have stringent standards for quality and safety. There's a whole area of different types of collectives, whether there's cooperatives, farmer business associations, self-help groups. We've heard some mixed stories. We've heard from India some very strong evidence that cooperatives and different types of collectives are still very strong. I think we heard yesterday in China that as private sector is kind of playing a larger role, what is sort of the ongoing role of those sort of collective. Some of you may be aware, we heard a bit yesterday of innovation platforms. People are trying to find other ways of kind of catalyzing, facilitating linkages between market actors. Is this something that we should be looking more closely at? What is the evidence for success of those? We also heard about contract farming. And there's clearly some areas of success where contract farming has provided a mechanism to reduce risk both on sides of producer and buyer. But I think there's also some evidence, particularly there's some studies in the pig sector in Vietnam where the barriers to entry for contract farming are so enormous. It's not really an option for smallholders, it's an option for entrepreneurs and investors. We heard about the need to invest in biosecurity and so on. Where do we go with that? And then this whole area of business development services, in the sense that should it be government or even should it be sort of NGOs and so on who are providing capacity building? But how do we kind of get the private sector to start providing those services that the public sector or the NGO sector has been providing and turn it all into kind of business models? Some of the things to think about. So just a couple of slides now to sort of put these kind of into questions for the forum. this experience of collectives is mixed, it's kind of evolving, there's still some strengths, but there's other models coming out. We heard about shared investment from Patrice yesterday. So what is the continued role in Asian livestock systems? And should there be kind of a conscious priority given to more of a business model approach, whether they be hubs where private sector service providers are involved? India has set up the model for producer company. What has been the success of that? Are there lessons to be learned there in contract farming? We heard yesterday also that traditional markets, informal markets if you like, still play a huge role in most Asian livestock markets. What is the best role of public policy in this case? Many of these need to be upgraded in the sense they need to be able to meet the standards of increasingly stringent markets. How does that happen, and what is the role of policy and investment to do those? What is the public policy options and institutional arrangements for private investment so to capitalize on the sector potential and contributing to more equitable growth? Some of the things that Vinod has just been talking about. Yesterday we heard a couple of times that it looked like the monogastric sort of trend was clearly away from smallholders, and it was just a matter of time before the economies of scale that are kind of implicit in that sort of production kind of take over. And there was a suggestion that ruminants remain kind of the core business for the smallholders in the long term. Is that should there be some sort of policy position? What would be the strategy if you kind of took that policy position? Vinod was just talking about smallholder competitiveness. Smallholders, there is some debate there. We recognize areas of competitiveness, but should there be a policy of sort of out-migration, as he was suggesting, sort of alternative mechanisms, diversify them away, or do we believe that since they still predominate, they're going to need to feed the growing demand that's going to continue in Asia? What's the balance there? There are risks, market and climate risks. What are the nature of public and private services to plan for and respond to those risks in a timely manner? And then finally, what are the possible institutional mechanisms for, at the trade level, regional level, in terms of harmonizing policies and collaboration? Are there synergies there which can increasingly be captured? So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.